the screen share. All right, so Solaris, a very catchy name for a long kind of a full title that is pretty convoluted, strengthening democratic engagement through value-based generative adversarial network. I had promised in the beginning of the project that I would never be able to say this long title without reading it, and I made it. I cannot remember it, but Solaris everyone does. And the main point of this long title is to say that there is this class of technologies, generative adversarial networks, and actually by the time we started the project, not only guns, which made our life way harder, that have a potential impact on democratic processes. What kind of impact? Good, bad? When we started, of course, everyone was full of fear that we heard the World War around the corner because of deepfakes. We haven't had one yet. But you never know, given the current situation. I know I don't want to take it lightly, but still. Of course, this is not working now. Yeah. And it should work from here. No, it's not working. Okay. Well, this is going to be annoying because that was the plan. Yeah. Okay. Maybe. No. It decided not to cooperate. You see the technology. Okay, what is Solaris then? I already told you a little bit about it. You see here many people from many different countries, and even most importantly than the countries, so many disciplines represented. Philosophy and ethics of technology, semiotics, media studies, international relations, law, computer science, citizen science, journalism, and media. We were able to have in the same room, physical or virtual, humanities, social science, academic, non-academics, the citizens at some point. It has been a huge challenge, but we got to the end. And this has been incredibly rich to have so many disciplines represented, and also so many countries that have also different stakes, challenges with deepfakes. We had 3 objectives. As any good project, we started with trying and understand what is this thing. So understanding the technical and socio-political potential of generative AI, because by the time we started, generative adversarial networks were just a little thing, and it expanded way beyond the guns. Our second objective was to co-create options for and the regulatory innovation potential for these technologies. We managed to draft our policy recommendations in the past months, and we also wanted to co-design value-based messages that using these technologies. And this part was for us very important to counterbalance the obvious worries that everyone had around deepfakes and these technologies. Now, we are going to go around the room so that you will meet the disciplines and the people who have been dealing with different parts. And let me begin by introducing Andrew McIntyre on that side of the room. You can stay there and I can click for you. My idea was to go around and give you the clicker, but the clicker decided that it doesn't work. So you can decide if you want to come to the front. Sure. Or I can click for you, Andrew, whatever you can click for me. I can click. Okay, so that's Andrew talking about how to understand the deepfakes.
Okay, well, hello, nice to meet you. I'm Andrew. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Amsterdam, and I specialize in the socio-political impacts of generative AI, and particularly deepfakes. So at the beginning of the project, we started tracking deepfakes. This was still a relatively new phenomenon at the time. And this is part of the database that we were starting to collect. And this includes a lot of really significant political deepfakes, such as the Zelensky deepfake at the start of the Russian invasion. But also it includes digital resurrection, includes more explicit disinformation as well. But we very quickly realized that these things are much more numerous than you can possibly account for. Yeah, much too hard to track them. And I think based on that, we started to understand just how deeply that AI systems and generative AI systems are being embedded in our social lives. So they are contributing to our collective knowledge. They're influencing how we interpret facts and truth. And they're also impacting our social values and our political values. And based on that, we decided that it wasn't really useful to continue looking at AI as a kind of tool or as just a product to be regulated, but as a social actor, something that exists within a social environment that is influenced by it and that influences that environment itself. And that environment is made up of numerous other social actors. So in order to understand this social role in a much more detailed and deep way, and to also understand the political implications of it, we developed this network approach. So Federica, you could move to the next slide. And the network approach basically, apologies, I should have moved to this earlier, but the network approach basically treats human and non-human social actors essentially the same. We're not saying that AI and humans are equivalent, but that they have equivalent social impacts and social influence. And this is based off of the work of Bruno Latour and others. But it is also mixed with socio-technical systems theory as well. So using this kind of approach, we wanted to map out the various different social actors involved in AI-generated content, how it's produced and disseminated. So Federica, next slide, please. And specifically, we wanted to know how this worked for deepfakes. So here we have a really simplified approximation of the social environment that emerges around deepfakes. And that includes the various social actors involved in the production, dissemination, and reception of deepfakes. Now, I'll very quickly go through, and we can actually move to the next slide if there's no, apologies. There's an expanded view, but I'll go through very quickly that there are various different social actors involved, and they're grouped here into Gen AI development, distribution, content creation, online circulation, user reception, and also policy and legislative intervention. And broadly, these things all relate to each other. They all impact upon each other, and they also impact on how we perceive and understand and possibly believe deepfakes when they reach us as users online. So broadly, the point we're trying to make with this is that we have many different things at play. It's how we perceive and understand deepfakes is influenced by various different social actors. And the point we take from that for the policy recommendations, which we'll talk about later on, is that it's not just about technical responses, it's not just about legislative responses, but it's about social responses and how do we adapt as a society to tackle this social problem. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So now that we have a theoretical understanding of what these things are, the next question was, how do they spread? And we hear from Aseniya Dimitrova, Brand Media Bulgaria.
Thank you. Okay, so as we heard from Andrew, there are a lot of actors and factors that are involved in the way that deepfakes are spread. So now in the next few minutes, I will try to explain a bit how they travel on social media and try to convince you that it doesn't take a high quality deepfake to have a real impact. So thank you, Federica, for changing this slide. No, this is the correct slide, please. Please go back to the previous slide. I'm sorry. Yes. So one of the few things that became very clear over the course of this project and over the course of the last 3 years was that traditional journalism and news reporting, as we know it, is under serious pressure. Why? Because factual reporting is very time consuming. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of human efforts to report, to verify, and on the contrary, it's not always rewarded by social media through attention, through distribution, and through clicks in the end. What social media's reward is, what they amplify is usually emotionally charged content. Just like the girl you can see on the picture, it's usually content that provokes negative emotions, shock, anger, hate, fear, anxiety. And they do this because emotional reactions drive engagement. And as we all know, engagement is the currency of the platform economy. So let's illustrate this through a few examples now. Federica, the next slide. I'm not sure if you know this example. It's a few years old now. It dates to 2023 when President was still Biden. And at that time, if you remember well, there were fears of escalation of the war in Ukraine. There was public anxiety that there might be deeper involvement of the United States in the war, maybe even remotely possibility of a mobilization of American citizens. I think it could be felt also in Europe, but this is an American example in any case. So this ex post shows a deepfake video of the president allegedly calling a national draft by lottery to defend Ukraine. So nowadays, with the new administration, of course, it is hard to imagine such a scenario. But back in that day, in that specific context, this was felt very plausible enough to trigger fear. So in the next slide, we can play a short extract of the video, please.
As usual.
With sound, ideally, yes.
With the sound would be better, right? I think the problem is that the sound does not come from your computer. That's the thing. See.
Well, maybe we can skip the sound. Just leave it like this. So in this video, he explained that he evokes specific legislation that allows him to mobilize citizens. In the end, the video talks about dangers of war. It talks about fear. It's not a technically speaking, it's not a very good fake, right? Today, 2 years later, we have seen much better things. Technologies have advanced a lot. Yet at this moment, it attracted millions of views, attracted many engagement reactions for within very short time. So it shows that with the right emotional trigger, in this case, it was fear, anxiety, and the right timing, as we had back in the day, this information can spread extremely fast, even without, once again, high technical quality. Eventually, you could see it in the previous slide with the post. The network added the so-called community notes explaining that the video was indeed a fake and it shouldn't be trusted. But the problem is that by this happens, the deepfake has already done its job, right? So research called this the continued influence effect. And it tells us that even after false information has been corrected, it continues to shape people's perceptions. So can we have the next slide, where we will see another example which is closer to our reality. We need another slide after that. Yeah, this one. Okay, this one has become very popular over the summer. Has anybody seen it or a version of it?
Yes.
Yes, so a few people. This one is taken from the profile of a high-ranking Bulgarian politician, a verified profile on Facebook. He's a member of the National Assembly from a pro-Russian party. It's not that important. You can see it with different versions of captions, depending on the audience and the particular agenda. This caption is humiliating to European leaders, which are supposed to be portrayed in this image. It says, the message reads something like Trump is scolding the European leaders. Indeed, still in the context of the peace talks related to the Russian war in Ukraine. And you can see clearly that this is a deepfake, right? You can, if you look closely at the eyes of what is supposed to be President Macron and President Ursula von der Leyen, their faces are distorted. And if you take another look, an even closer look at their feet, there is an additional pair of shoes between the feet of President Macron and President Ursula von der Leyen. So clearly a deepfake, and I think we can all agree that this deepfake has been shared intentionally. What do you think happened when I personally reported this to Facebook as fake? Any ideas, any suggestions? Nothing, indeed, Lucy, you're right. Nothing happened. The post is still there today, a few months later. No debunking, no community notes, and above all, no consequences. So, of course, many such examples, many similar examples exist. However different they may be, they usually share one thing in common. They certainly do not aim to inform, but to deform reality. Deepfakes have become just one weapon in the contemporary disinformation campaigns, but they can surely be a weapon of mass destruction. There is really, today, we'll see it later, but there is no limit to creating artificial content. Very often this is being done for fun, but increasingly it is done to mislead people into believing that their families are in danger, that their leaders are incompetent, or that simple answers exist to complicated questions. We invent realities, we create artifacts, and we assign meaning to them depending on the agenda. So my final message is that the impact of deepfakes lies less in their realism and more in how platforms, emotions, and authority turn artificial artifacts into meaningful realities. But speaking of assigning meanings, I think there are more competent people than me to speak. So I give the floor to Giuditta, if you like me.
For the Thanks, Federica. I am Giuditta Bassano. I'm associate professor in semiotics from LUMSA, Rome, and I took part to the project from a semiotic perspective. So our aim, mine and of my colleague Piero Polidoro seated here next to me, was to evaluate images in a more technical sense, let's say, and trying to describe. I need to say also that there are many different philosophical approaches to images. So our one was probably not the only one, but we thought it was very effective, or especially effective. And we try to explain the way we can say images are always leveled. Can we please speak to the next one? Let's consider these two random examples. On the left, you have a very famous actor. I think you all can recognize Will Smith, a very famous American global Hollywood actor. He's simply eating a plate of spaghetti. It looks like very ordinary and somehow relaxed moment. Yet, this is a deep fake, which doesn't have any intention to harm, but it was actually used as a sort of meme who measures over years the quality of fake images. So the early versions were clearly fake. The hands were distorted, so the profile of his face. Now it's completely normal. And it teaches us that somehow when an image became culturally ordinary, it activates our trust automatically. On the other side, you see another, let's say, neutral image. Well, this was generated by ChatGPT for me. I asked ChatGPT to generate it. It simulates the style of an infrared wildlife documentary. But the only problem is those two animals could never live in the same continent. Okay? So the problem is never did and could never do this. So the problem is not only falsity, but also how falsity works, circulates, is fabricated, and also for which purposes. Can we please switch to the next one? I will have a video as well. I don't know if it starts.
I think we have the problem of the sound again.
Yeah. Anyway, the video was realized by an Australian news information channel. And the idea was to interrogate a group of very clever students, asking them to interpret some videos and answering whether they thought they were fake or real. I'm very sorry you can hear the sound that went together with the videos, but anyway, it was quite impressive because the students made a lot of mistakes. And when they were asked to provide the reasons why they thought that the singular video was real or fake, they provided very founded reasons. So I fully agree with them in many cases. And so the video showed us that people is no more, let's say, the viewer is no longer passive spectator, but rather a true evaluator. And the name on the other side of the page show the different layers by which, as semioticians, we try to read images. In this case, for example, the students were asked to provide their interpretation, but they weren't given any kind of circumstances. So they didn't know why and how those videos were realized. So this idea of a layered image that must be interpreted as complex, and the idea of differentiating and also articulating such layers is, we would say, fundamental today in the era of synthetic media. And so the shift to such let's say, a perspective is not more optional, but somehow it's necessary. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we make a jump toward the regulation with Dolores Sanchez.
So boring.
No?
Okay, Dolores Sanchez Galera from Carlos III University and a senior researcher at Carlos III University. So I've been acting as a partner for this regulatory part, but we also have some collaboration from other people that have been dealing with the legal field. Let's say that the input for the project since the beginning was to understand how to approach such a problem from a perspective that wasn't only regarding a single field of law, but cross-legal analysis, which was the methodology that was going to be applied. This is very, very unique in a way because lawyers are not only working by themselves, but also not dialoguing in between lawyers themselves, between fields, private and public lawyers. Or my field is economic regulation, which is actually the field that has been failing to understand that the problem of tech, especially big tech, which is the concentration of power in 5 big techs, which everyone knows here who they are, have been and are ruling the world. The result is, this is one of the results. In this slide, I was trying to think where we were when we were thinking at the genesis of the project, where we were. Well, we were that people was taking an image and faking that image, maybe just for sexual purposes. That was the first deepfake in a social network, right? And this, of course, and regulators at that time were thinking, okay, we have the GDPR images, we have some human rights which are honored, but not really considering seriously that this was insufficient. And then we have the digital media in case this goes and develops. The thing is that today we are in an explosion that we cannot contain or control anymore. And if we could ever control this, was not even 3 years ago, but it's probably something that regulators should be asking themselves and think, where are we? Where did we lose here? And basically, they lose the opportunity to dialogue with technicians to understand what the real problem is. So the legal mechanisms combating today harmful deepfakes, although we have some of them, are insufficient. And why these are insufficient? Well, first, you can read, I've been naming some of them. We know that the AIIS is still not in force, and we know that it's already a failure because deepfakes are only included in a specific part, which is Article 50 regarding transparency rules, but still there is a big paradox there because, of course, it wasn't there wasn't a real concern about the fact that this was one of the high-risk democracy, because this is actually what the whole project is concerned and what the whole problem of regulating could be dealing with. But then, apart from that, during this itinerary of this process, we have been having countries like Denmark or Spain that have been pioneering specific regulations. For instance, Denmark in intimate rights now, they have a strict law, and we have and probably the most important stage at regulatory level is that we have had this act coming into a puzzle of very many different regulations, so a multi-layer specific regulatory ecosystem in which the big change for the European law pillar of liability that was introduced some ages ago with the Product Liability Directive is changed now. The burden of proof is being eased. Now the plaintiff doesn't have to prove that the product has failures. It's actually the employer, the provider that have a strict liability rule and compliant market rules for several products. And of course, this is also due to the fact that all the European regulation is mainly focused on facilitating the way our European market plays and goes. And it's a very complex ecosystem. It's very difficult to think that one single field of law, I belong to the public law field, can deal with all this without dialoguing, as I say, with the others. For instance, considering that there are constitutional issues there, private law issues, comparative law issues, well, you can imagine how for a lawyer that has been also thinking that the tech was something that didn't have to deal with its challenges, everyday challenges. Today, if we think that administrative law is all about automatization, which doesn't mean using artificial intelligence, but now artificial intelligence is entering into this field, we are not just in front about a deep fake, but a deep life in which both will be deciding, and it will be difficult to be speaking with a person in the future to try to contrast a specific result from an administrative act, just as a specific example. Maybe you can go to so this is where we were and where we are now. And the challenges ahead, well, of course, we have a lot to deal with this at regulatory level, in the sense that we need more awareness on the fact that lawyers need to be dialoguing with other sciences. Probably Solaris is a very good example and project of a dialogue and interdisciplinary work, the way we should be working in the future. It would be naive to think that we didn't know this. We've been always working, especially at horizon level, and thinking as a must, we all need to be interdisciplinary. We create these big consortiums, but very often we just stay in our own silos. I think it's impossible to work in silos anymore, especially at the regulatory level. And this is a big challenge, because especially for traditional social scientists, this is very difficult. It's been very difficult sometimes to engage into specific concerns of digital media or philosophy. For some lawyers, it's even difficult sometimes to think about theoretical foundations and conceptualization in the old way, especially speaking that the Netherlands have been one of our builders of natural law in the past. This is a tradition of European lawyers that needs to be kept, because we are going towards a future of law trying to regulate in a very unhumanistic way. So I think human at the center, dignity at the center, and our rule of law culture, it's very important considering the challenges ahead. So we could be thinking of data sovereignty issues as a field to explore in terms of legal challenges. Of course, we have on the other side, this is when considering unlawful deepfakes, which could be touching upon every single field of law and economic sphere of a human being. But if we go to the lawful deepfakes, there are also challenges here, because of course we know that deepfakes is a door open for progress, especially in medical care and healthcare. That has been put a lot of emphasis on that, and media and entertainment, education. We were thinking about how much we can improve for digital media certain type of videos. So these fake techniques could help that. But then we need to think how to combine these two binaries. So how to contain what could be actually risky for human beings, and how we use this instrument that is at the service of the common good, but how we also understand common good today, and how can we interplay a regulation that is already uncontainable. So thank you there are a lot of challenges ahead. But
Thank you, Lola. So after reflecting on what is the state of the art and the challenges ahead of regulation, we also had to do another bit on the understanding what is this deepfake doing. And now we go to the impact on deepfakes on democratic processes per se with Gjon.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. I tried to make this as concise as possible. There's four main findings that we have seen about how these deepfakes can really threaten the stability of a democratic country. And the first one is very readily apparent. It's this relationship of trust and this idea that the technology injects an element of confusion into a society. So deepfakes effectively can flood the internet with noise, creating what in literature is called as epistemic fog. There's this idea that citizens cannot really tell or cannot really believe what they see. This is no longer a question of basic facts. So essentially, society in general has a more difficult time agreeing on what is true and what isn't. And when this is the status quo, it becomes very difficult to communicate, coordinate, collaborate in order to solve large-scale problems. So that is evidently apparent, but I think a fundamental problem of this technology, a fundamental issue. The other one is the idea of having an easy excuse. So in literature, we call this the liar's dividend. Essentially, it's a way to deny reality by having a very easy scapegoat. So the mere existence of deepfakes can give actors that are malignant this new sort of tool to use where they can circumvent their responsibility by simply claiming that a piece of evidence that could be incriminatory is simply a deepfake. And if it gets to the point where it's indistinguishable from reality, then how do you challenge that? So, for instance, in a politician's case, they could simply avoid all consequences by saying that something is AI, effectively making truth negotiable rather than truth, actual. The other aspect that is highly relevant to stability in a society is the fact that certain demographics are more targeted than other ones. A large, disproportionate percentage of women are targeted and minorities as well. And this was very much a problem in the early stages of AI when the development of the technology was in its early stages. But the quantitative data shows that 96% of these deepfakes were effectively targeting women. So it can be a very malignant technology used to intimidate women and underrepresented minorities from participating in democratic processes or even running for office. So that is a very important consideration that we also have in our book about this topic. The other one is quite fascinating. It's this concept of microfakes. So deepfakes that target well-known politicians, they usually get fact-checked very quickly and taken down as a result fairly well, even though they have a destabilizing effect by themselves. But these microfakes, they more focus on less known officials, like say members in a local municipality, in Utrecht, for instance. I mean, they fly under the radar a little bit, so it's much more difficult to track and stop the spread of something like that. So that's a microfake. And their effect could potentially be even more destabilizing because, well, they go unchecked and there could be many of them. So those are the four main ways in which we have identified this technology as being a threat to democratic integrity. So thanks.
Oh, these are the usual academics. They talk. But no, one thing that we did actually was tinkering with the deepfakes. You will now hear from Domenico about how we have been ourselves playing with the thing.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm not an academic.
You are not the social sciences and humanities.
So I'm the
Sui generis one. Exactly.
And in the slide, you can see all the people working at CINI, that is the Italian National Consortium for Informatics. We developed a platform that was intended to let non-expert people to generate deepfakes. So the platform has been changed during the project as the new technologies were released. So we started with GANs, but at the end, the platform includes also LLM, other type of transformers-based technologies, in order to be a sort of collector of open source libraries that can be used to do face swapping, also live face swapping, face reenactment, voice cloning, lip syncing, generating avatar, and also we added this feature of creating also text coming from, for example, documents, so you can use the platform in order to have a single point of access to all the existing technologies that can be used to create deepfakes. The platform has been used to realize the use cases that you can see shown there, and has been used also to have an practical section with expert people from ANSA, that is one of the partners in the project, in order to understand how the technical part of the project can be linked with the more human and humanity-related part. So that's all from me.
Thank you, Domenico. So now get to the part of the project where we were really hands-on. We had 3 use cases, and we start with the first one. We have Nike Online.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm here to very briefly describe the first use case, which focused on the psychology of deepfakes. You can go on the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So as noted earlier by Andrew, the process from generative AI development to user reception is very complex and long. As such, the first use case more narrowly focused on end users and their reception of such content, with a particular emphasis on understanding the perceived trustworthiness of AI-generated content, contributing factors, and the outcomes. Next slide. Yes. So more specifically, the first use case focused on understanding the conditions under which deepfakes shape people's perceptions, attitudes, and behavior, which is particularly important for topics that are highly polarized and socially consequential, such as climate change and immigration. Within this use case, we've conducted 2 closely related studies. Study 1 focused on early responses to deepfakes, specifically what predicts whether people detect them, how much they like them, and whether they would share them online. While study 2 turned focus to a broader question, so whether exposure to a single deepfake can shift attitudes toward climate change and immigration, and under what conditions this occurs. To address these questions, we ran an online experiment with 1,124 adults from Slovenia, Italy, and the United Kingdom. Participants first reported their baseline attitudes toward climate change and immigration, after which they were exposed to 2 short videos, one related to climate change and one related to immigration. Of course, the order was randomized. After each video, participants completed post-video measures, including the perceived deepfake trustworthiness questionnaire, which is a multidimensional scale of perceived trustworthiness that we developed in the first half of the project. And participants also reported their post-exposure attitudes. So all videos featured well-known public figures and lasted about 1 minute. And for each topic, there were 6 versions of the videos: a real video, a high-quality deepfake, and a low-quality deepfake, and each combined with either a positive or a negative message. And the stimuli can be seen on the slide. So as you see, there were very well-known figures such as Trump, Greta Thunberg, and so on. Next slide. Turning to the results, study 1 showed the detection depends strongly on both the technical quality of the deepfake and characteristics of the viewer. High-quality deepfakes were substantially harder to detect than low-quality deepfakes across both topics. So, for example, about 44 to 60% of participants detected low-quality deepfakes, but only about 31 to 37% correctly identified high-quality ones. At the individual level, media literacy emerged as a clear protective factor, with more media literate participants being better at detecting deepfakes. In contrast, participants who held more positive attitudes towards the person depicted in the video were less likely to recognize the manipulation. Moreover, detection had downstream consequences. When a deepfake was not detected, participants tended to like it more, and this increased their willingness to share it, highlighting emotional engagement as a key mechanism, linking detection failures to potential dissemination. And here's a QR code to more information about study 1. But study 2 examined whether deepfakes can also influence broader attitudes. And overall, deepfakes were about as persuasive as real videos, but the attitudinal shifts resulting from a single exposure were quite modest. What mattered most were the moderators. So we found that perceived trustworthiness of the content consistently shaped attitudinal effects. So deepfakes exerted stronger influence when the message and source were seen as credible. Perceived trustworthiness of presentation, which refers to delivery and technical quality and so on, also played a role, but a more limited one. And political orientation, for example, did not moderate deepfakes effects at all. So taken together to kind of put a bottom line to this, these findings suggest that what a video says may matter more than how realistic it looks, and even technically imperfect deepfakes can influence perceptions and attitudes if their message is perceived as trustworthy. If you want more information, here are the QR codes, but now I give the floor to use case 2.
Thank you very much, Nelly. So we move from the perception of the public to how the experts, Tommaso.
I will try to be concise, even though the use case 2 was a very interesting activity. So it was also a composite activity. It unfolded in the first part, 8-9 May 2025 in Rome, in the ASA headquarters. And then we had a follow-up activity because we still had so many questions. I believe it was because we were interested in the same phenomenon, so AI generated this information, but methods and tools of journalists are quite different on the approach of the SOLARIS consortium, but I would say academia. So I guess we can go to the next slide already. Again, the first activity unfolded in Rome. Same days there was the Pope conclave, so the two main events going on in Rome, and we were interested in analyzing were the escalating procedures for journalists. So when you detect a deepfake, how you behave. Well, first of all, how do you detect it? What are the AI literacy skills of journalists? And to do so, we involved also external stakeholders. We had people from a corporate, so Deloitte, we had people from Agence France Presse, AFP, with representatives of the European institutions. So it was a very composite roundtable discussion. The follow-up activity tried to narrow down. So now that we have a more clear idea of what these escalation procedures look like, we want to understand better how you individually as a professional approach deepfake. So what's your rule of thumb or really experience in being able to tell what's human-made versus machine or hybrid-made? I think we can go to the next slide. So in the first activity, we showed the 3 deepfakes generated by the SOLARIS video for the sake of avoiding accidents. We informed journalists in advance, well, these are deepfakes. I mean, they could tell, still a safety measure. And they basically walked us through the process of what happens when they, what they look for in videos to tell if they're made up or not, and in which case they escalate, and who they check with about information online. So basically, it all comes down to it's important to have a network of people, of human beings, that is possible to approach with institutions, spokespeople, colleagues on the field that are able to inform journalists of what's going on and to compare how it is being presented online. We could say that the results of the first activity were kind of in line with also what was found in use case 1. So plausibility matters more than visual quality. Doesn't matter if a deepfake is perfect, it just needs to be credible, or at least in line with what we believe is true. Then we discussed the human in the loop. So AI tools may assist experts, but we cannot relinquish the moral responsibility and professional responsibility to check on the on softwares helping us on their output. Then we have resilient but fragile workflows, meaning that escalation depends on individual expertise, but there is no standardized protocol. So it really all relies on a journalist being able to tell what's AI made and what's not. And finally, limits of counter narrative. So we can debunk fake news, but of course, it's impossible to delete the original narrative as depicted in the deepfake. Second activity result, and with this I finish. The most interesting finding was really what journalists could tell us in terms of, well, you don't need to be a technology expert. You just need to be aware of the, well, first of all, of the sources, the context where the or the means through which the news is being spread, which is already very much telling. Then the content, the plausibility of the content, and then if it's in line with what we know from our experience in real life. Also the context, so if there are contextual details in the video, not really technical discrepancies, but just if it makes sense that some news is taking place at a given time, a given place, again, in line with our experience. And only in very difficult cases, in very high quality deepfakes and technical details and digital, well, AI literacy can save the day, let's say.
Thank you. Oh. As you can see, we are running out of time and we will be late, but coffee will stay, so don't worry. And there are still a few things that we need to present. Also, in the context of use case 2, we developed a detection tool. And Livio, if you are online, perhaps you can tell us in literally 3 minutes what it is about, knowing that none of us knows anything about mathematics and statistics, so you can probably skip all the technical details.
Thank you, Federica, and thank you for your great direction of the coordination of this fantastic group. Well, I try to be as concise as possible. Let's start with the fact that I believe that given the current combination of available knowledge and data, is nearly impossible to design a mathematical model capable of detecting all fake news in real time or even in quasi-real time. The best we can do is to provide the decision makers, journalists, media professionals, and others working in the media sector with a tool that might assist them in identifying potential fake news. With that said, well, the model Luca and I, devised is basically a two-level hybrid detection framework that combines semantic analysis with behavioral signal recognition. So basically, we have 2 levels: sentiment analysis on one side, and then anomaly detection on the other side. What we found is basically we analyzed 25 curated news articles, 20 authentic coming from ANSA, 5 artificially fabricated to simulate a disinformation scenario. Fake news, basically what we found is that fake news concentrates on 3 emotional dimensions: fear, anger, and sadness, with a distinctive emotional volatility signature, meaning that we have a lot of volatility, variability. Real news, by contrast, maintains emotional coherence with balanced distribution across trust and anticipation. More precisely, fake news exhibits 3 times higher emotional variance, so much more volatility. This is not coincidental because false narratives deliberately alternate between intense emotions to maximize engagement while authentic reporting maintains a coherent emotional trajectory aligned with factual development. So this is the level 1, sentiment. Behavioral anomaly detection. So basically, when this information spreads, search behavior changes. So people ask Google. So in following unusual patterns, such we have something like energy bursts, which deviate from the baseline distribution. So many people get into get to the keyboard and try to find out things. Luca will briefly explain the methodology. Please, Luca, if I may have him just talking briefly about the methodology.
Can I
Luca,
go to the next slide?
Yes.
Not yet.
Not yet. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Luca Biazzo from PhD student from University of Brescia. And very quickly, our approach, the second level, addresses the challenge of anomaly detection, in this case, the fake news, by deploying a 3-step methodology using mainly statistical tools. We took the Google Trends keyword query time series, in this case nuclear, and we generate 200 replicates that will serve as training data 3 fundamental models. 2 classical statistical methods, such as autoregressive integrating moving average and exponential smoothing, and the extreme learning machine that is a neural network that identifies nonlinear relationships which classical methods may miss. This replicate serves to have the forecast model to produce predictions on the test set, which contains data where we injected an artificial spike in the keyword search time series, which simulates this fake news-driven search event. And these empirical forecasts form data-driven distributions for anomaly detection, which occurs if all the 3 models forecast the same anomaly. And this is to avoid false, the aim of this is to avoid false anomalies. Finally, our methodology adapts to data characteristics. So if the forecast errors exhibit normality, we apply the classic binomial distribution for the hypothesis testing of anomaly detection. But in contrast, as in our empirical setting, if the normality test is failed, we use the bootstrap-based percentile interval. So starting from the original values and the forecast from the replicates of the series. And if the forecasts are out of this confidence bound, we flag the anomalies. Finally, so the results were that all the 3 models identified successfully the anomaly, and there were 0 false positives on the legitimate data. So now I can leave the floor to Professor Fenga to finish the presentation. Thank you.
Oh, yes, just 1 minute, if I may, Federica, 1 minute.
Yeah, very quickly, because otherwise
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Go. You have this slide.
So, thank you. So fake news shows, higher emotional variance and concentration of fear, anger, and sadness, as we said before. And in essence, we can provide, like I said before, decision makers with something that can help them to make a more informed decision. Thank you very much, Federica, for your.
Thank you very much, Livio.
Thank you.
The use case goes back to the public or the citizens, but with another role. You hear from Romane online, please.
Thank you, Federica. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here online. Thank you for making this possible. I'm Roman Blasel from the European Citizen Science Association. We're an NGO based in Berlin. And yes, I will very briefly introduce use case 3. I will try to be very quick so that we don't delay the coffee too much. So in use case 3, we question whether AI-generated content can be used for good. And what we mean by good is we took the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a common definition. We focus specifically on three: on good health and well-being, with a particular emphasis on mental health, on gender equality, focusing on women in science, and on climate action, focusing on the effects of climate change. So our goal was to co-create AI-generated content that would be capable of conveying positive and constructive messages related to the development goals, while also understanding how citizens actually receive and interpret those contents. So we organized 3 online workshops, bringing together 44 citizens from different European countries with diverse ages, backgrounds, and level of familiarity with AI. And the goal of these workshops was really to discuss if and how AI-generated video could be desirable. So our main focus was on user reception and public discourse. On user reception, because we wanted to understand how people emotionally perceive AI-generated media and how they negotiate ethical and social meanings when engaging with those content. And on public discourse, because we wondered how such content could help shape public discourse to better support the development goals. Next slide, please. So during the workshops, participants were invited to view and discuss 8 AI-generated videos that we created within the projects. You have screenshots on this slide. So this included a synthetic character discussing the idea of deepfake therapy in mental health care, a synthetic version of Marie Curie speaking about her scientific work, and a synthetic character describing displacement caused by climate change. So these videos serve really more as a conversation starter to get everybody in the same understanding, and participants were encouraged to reflect collectively on their emotions, on their emotional, ethical, and aesthetic reactions. And 3 main insights emerged from this. First, participants expressed a strong preference for realistic and relatable stories, so stories that felt like things that could have actually happened to someone. Second, voice and gesture were perceived as crucial for credibility and empathy. So even while participants were aware that a character was synthetic, subtle elements such as tone, rhythm, and body language played a major role in how trustworthy and emotionally engaging the content felt. And third, participants were very clear about ethical conditions. They called for transparency about the creation process. They wanted to know who designed the content and with which goals. And if those 3 criteria of realistic story, realistic character, and transparent process are met, then participants were rather favorable of AI-generated content in the context of education, especially. And they imagined a range of AI for good applications, which include AI avatars to support health prevention, and the digital resurrection of historical figures or historical events for education and science outreach, and AI tutors or sign language interpreters to improve accessibility. From a theoretical perspective, use case 3 demonstrated how participants mobilize complex semiotic strategies, simultaneously negotiating ethical concerns, cognitive understanding, emotional engagement, and aesthetic judgment. And to conclude, our findings suggest that AI-generated content can support the Sustainable Development Goals, but only if it is socially grounded, ethically transparent, emotionally sensitive, and developed with citizens rather than for them. Thank you, and I hand over to Angelo, I think.
Thank you. At this point, you might be wondering, then, what is an ethical AI? We have the answer. Angelo, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Federica, for this introduction. Some words to introduce myself. I'm Angelo Tumminelli, and I'm a researcher in moral philosophy at LUMSA University. I work with full Professor Calogero Caltagirone, and our contribution in the project is to give an ethical perspective to this project. I can summarize the main points or main results of our research in 3 points. The first one, anthropological basis. I and Professor Caltagirone speak about the techno-human condition because, according for us, technology, and in particular way, artificial intelligence, is an occasion to rediscover our humanity. This is the point. The point is that we can use artificial intelligence in order to promote the human flourishing. This is the first point, the fact that according to our perspective, the technology is an expression of human transcendence, of a human openness to the sense of the existence. The second point, anthropoetic perspective. When we speak about ethics, maybe we think to respect of law. But our perspective is different. Ethics is not only respect of law. Ethics is action, human action, in order to promote human flourishing. To use an expression of Martha Nussbaum, or starting from Aristotelian point of view, human action is ethical if promote the telos. Telos is the task, we can say. So our perspective is anthropoetic perspective. The last point is the topic of responsibility. Because in order to promote an ethical use of deepfake, we have to promote also digital literacy and co-responsibility. About this, we can quote in our research, in our paper, two very important philosophers of last century. The first one, Hans Jonas, who think the principle of responsibility. And the second one is Carlotto Apel, who speaks about co-responsibility. So according to our perspective, we have to improve co-responsibility in order to use artificial intelligence and deep fakes to promote human dignity and the value of human essence. About this, next slide, please, Federica. This morning we will do a panel about the role of artificial intelligence to promote inclusion. So, starting from results of use case 3, we can say that it is possible an ethical use of deepfake. It is possible in a lot of fields, such as in medical, about medical aspects, or in education, or to promote inclusive content. It's possible, according to us, an ethical use of deepfake and also an ethical use of artificial intelligence for human dignity. Our task in the project was to create a philosophical framework, because the project is not only in applicative sense, but it's necessary to insert our reflection, our research in a philosophical framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be waiting for the so what then, and here it comes. These are our policy recommendations, Yazi, and of course I'm going to press you because we are already late.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it short. So hi everyone, I'm Yassama Yousefi from DEXI. And so really then what? What did we learn from Solaris as a project, and what did we learn from all of the use cases, and how can we implement that into policy? Not a very easy question to answer, but especially to be innovative, because there are a lot of policy recommendations out there, and we wanted to stand out by, let's say, kind of having this interdisciplinarity vision of the project also in the policy recommendations. So we started by building this guiding framework based on a work of Natalie Smuha, and she has identified that AI can have individual, collective, and societal harms, and we use this as a guiding framework to orient our policy recommendations. So we are not with the idea that policy should be a one-size-fits-all solution, and we think it should be proportionate, targeted, and distributive. And well, yeah, we use this as a guiding framework, so I can go to the next slide. And we prioritized the, let's say, the proposals that we have for policy based on the level of harm, at which level they pose the harm that they do, in order to address exactly that. So we grouped them into 3 categories of regarding clarification, coordination, and citizenship. So for clarification, we mean mainly to clarify and unify legal frameworks that are out there. So we don't want to create new legal frameworks. Rather, we want to kind of like clarify the definitions that are already existent and the relationships between these definitions and the interrelations between all of these regulations, because there is a bit of, as Lola was saying, there is a bit of confusion as to what does what exactly. And then that applies also to transparency obligations and to personality rights and likeness rights, which is again something that is up for debate because there are a lot of frameworks out there, and there is no clear image of how they interact with one another. And then we have coordination, which is more institutional, about the relationship between the infrastructures that are supposed to, let's say, protect both at the individual level and at the societal level people. But of course, since we're talking about institutions here, this is more of a societal level policy proposal. And then we have citizenship. So especially what we learned from our third use case that you just heard by Roman, we have basically understood that it's not just, it's not ideal to keep citizens as a passive, let's say, receiver of such content, but rather keep them active. And by that, in order to do that, we think it's best to equip them with literacy, so with knowledge that should be implemented from scratch in education. And so if you go to the next slide, Federica. So basically, this is just what I said right now, but a bit more in detail. But since we don't have much time, I think I'm going to skip them and go to the last slide. Yeah. So basically, what we learned all in all is that deepfakes cannot and should not be governed by artifact-focused solutions only, and they should not be just seen as a technological issue that requires a technical fix. Democratic resilience requires legal clarity, institutional coordination, and civic capacity altogether. And that synthetic media should be contained where harmful, and it should also be mobilized where beneficial. So in the policy recommendations, we're also thinking about how we can actually use this AI for good. And then governance should remain proportionate and rights-oriented and participatory. And well, if there are any more questions, I can answer them in the break.
Thank you so much. How far we got, and you will think, oh, okay, now they are done. In fact, no, this is only the beginning. And in fact, you are here. And if we had more time, I would go through all the kind of the agenda for this afternoon and tomorrow, which I'm going to skip. But I can tell you there are so many panels, so many people, so many perspectives. And I think we now need a solid break with coffee, tea, there is some food left over, and I suggest we come back in 10 to 15 maximum minutes so that we can start from the panel, but at least you heard what we have done in 3 years. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, hi, I'm Lucy. Nice to meet you. I'm Carrie.
Yes.
I just want to meet everybody that they're explaining everything.
You great to see you.
Carrie, how do we gather all the